All right, guys. Just so a little bit of background. Before I started doing jujitsu, or actually, not before, when I started doing jujitsu, I also started learning how to become a scaffold builder. If you don't know what that is, just Google it, look it up. It's pretty cool, I think. I had a really great time with it. I learned a lot from it, and yeah. So one of the crazy things about scaffold building that I see a lot in jiu-jitsu is that a lot of information gets lost in translation. So for example, in scaffold building, you have your English technical terms, and then you have your English slang, depending on the crew that you're working with and who's teaching you. And then also in Spanish, it's the same thing. It's depending on the crew you're working with, and the slang or the particular dialect that they're from will give them specific names to those things in scaffold building, and the same with jiu-jitsu. So just kind of in scaffold building, a post is un poste, right, in Spanish, what we call it. A horizontal bar, also known as a runner or a bearer, depending on how you were using it. In Spanish, that was a caballo. And this is my theory, is that somebody somewhere in the beginning of scaffolding, in with crews that only spoke Spanish, was that phonetically, horizontal bar, that's a mouthful, so they would shorten it down to a whore, H-O-R, not lady in the evening, but H-O-R. But if they were to use plural, they would add the S, horse. So phonetically, horse literally sounds as a horse that you ride, and when you translate that to Spanish, that is a caballo. And so a lot of people would call a horizontal bar a caballo. And that's just how they learned it, generation after generation after that. I know that's how I was taught it when I was learning the technical terms in Spanish, was the caballo. Another one was the rigid clamps. The rigid clamps that we would use to hold the runners or the horizontal bars onto the post and any other thing that we need them for. And the rigid clamp was also called a 90 clamp or 90-degree clamp. And in Spanish, that was a perro. And it was because it was like a dog. It resembled a dog biting down, on something or someone. Now, this is a funny one, and it always cracks me up, is that a swivel clamp, okay, which was very versatile, it was called a perro joto in Spanish. Now, when you take perro joto and you do a literal translation to English, it's called the gay dog. So that was kind of interesting. That was funny. You can only imagine my face the first time I heard someone say, "Hey, you, editor, go get the perro joto." So I didn't know if it was somebody's name or nickname, or if it was a joke being played on me or what. But it was quite an interesting situation the first time I was involved with that particular term in the field, in scaffold building. But it's the same way, in jiu-jitsu, especially from the early parts of jiu-jitsu, when the first Americans started to learn jiu-jitsu from the source. I believe that the Portuguese translating to English, their English was not very good, or it wasn't very technical English. It was just enough to get the information through. And that's why you have a lot of analogies in jiu-jitsu. And those same analogies are just being repeated over and over again, which is perfectly fine. It gets the information out. But, and the people that first learned it from the Portuguese speaking masters, I should say, the Brazilian Portuguese, is that, they just kind of took with it, and they just formed their own thoughts based on the limited English that they were being given, the information on, and also the limited Portuguese that they knew, and they just kind of ran with it. And it's taken a while, but I feel like now people are starting to really understand, the jiu-jitsu. I know that I just feel like I'm just starting to really understand, jiu-jitsu, and I've been doing this 13 years. And so the information got mixed up or it got lost in translation, and I find it a lot. For example, the defense to a head arm choke, the classic defense is answering the phone, and that's great, but there's a lot of information that it was left out, especially when I first learned it, and there's a lot of information that I see when people teach it that's also being left out, and that's either because we just took their word for it, and the people who taught it to us or whoever we saw it from, we just took their word for it, and we just kind of ran with it, and it may have worked for us maybe once or twice, but really it was more like a fluke, and so it gave us a false sense of confidence with it, false sense of knowledge that we actually knew how to defend it, and we were doing it wrong. And I know I was kind of just putting my head up, I would flex my shoulder and arm, everything in my neck, so I wouldn't get really choked, but that gave me a lot of neck issues because I was the smallest guy going against the bigger guys all the time, especially in training. And it wasn't after a while, after many years later, that it was like, I have to frame my palm against my head and push in as I push my neck back into my palm, and it creates a wedge, so that way I can breathe better. I may not be able to definitely escape from a big guy gripping tight, but I can buy myself more time to come up with a plan on how to escape, or hopefully make them wear the grips out. But it was like that. I had to frame against my own self to create that little triangle, making it very hard for the person to collapse it on me, as opposed to just me being like this and I'm already choking myself. So little things like that, little details. And with jiu-jitsu, as we know, there's 3 ways that you learn it. It's visually, hearing it, and the more important one is feeling it. And so if you've never done it or had it done to you correctly, if you've never felt that, it's gonna take you a long time for you to actually understand that feel part. Some people, it may take a lifetime. Other people, it may take a couple years and they got it. And it might be something to where you don't even think about it, and you're just like, yeah, this is the defense to that, and you just go along, and someone else comes along and you teach them that thing or that particular defense, and it just kind of goes down and down and down the line. But yeah, it's kind of interesting. But I said all that just so you guys can maybe think of positions, think of submissions, whether it's offense or defense, whatever it is in jiu-jitsu, and really break it down and frame and breathe and create space or take space away, because as we know, jiu-jitsu is all about expansion or contraction. That's the only thing. And so think about it, and maybe you found yourself in different scenarios, not just jiu-jitsu, but other parts of your daily life where maybe you have information but it was lost in translation, some information, and you kind of found yourself in a weird, peculiar situation and kind of chuckle at it. But anyways, hope you guys are doing well. You guys have a good day.